On 30 May 1942, Yorktown left the yard and headed back to sea, patched but not completely repaired. Under Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, Yorktown and her escorts formed Task Force 17. The day before, Task Force 16 had sortied, comprised of carriers, Hornet, and Enterprise, and additional escort vessels. Both task forces left Pearl before the Japanese submarine pickets were in place.
And I stood on deck and watched the Hornet go out and the Enterprise follow her, and the cruisers and destroyers that were our escort ships and so on. And I was aware that this was something like Nelson sailing to Trafalgar. It was a great moment in naval history.
Here was an opportunity, and instead of being ambushed, you are the ambusher. and I think Admiral Nimitz, he made that big decision. I think he did it with confidence.
Task Force 16 and Task Force 17 were sent to a point approximately 300 miles northeast of Kido Butai's anticipated axis of advance. The spot was open ocean, 32 north, 173 west, known as Point Luck.
Nimitz was a brilliant person. He considered everything possibility. In other words, as a submarine gent there, he knew exactly what could be done, by the enemy, what could be done this, what was the odds here, what was the odds there.
And I should thank God for the good brains on top, like Nimitz, Fletcher, Spruance, the intelligence group in Pearl Harbor, Hybo unit. They did a great job in breaking the code. In fact, Admiral Nimitz made a statement then which seemed arrogant. He says, "I'm going to ambush the Japanese." But that's exactly what he did. There was that place called Point Luck.
So we went off, and that was how come we got out to the end of our line and we weren't attacked, and we thought we should be. So we decided to go a little bit further. So we went out about 15 more minutes and still hadn't been attacked. And we asked him about one more time, and he said, "Well, this is the last one." We had gone about 5 minutes into that second extension when the General Quarters horn went off.
On June 3rd, 1942, at 09:25, after extending his patrol leg, Ensign Jack Reed at the controls of PBY 8V55 radioed, "Sighted main body," and 2 minutes later radioed, "Bearing 262, distance 700.
I immediately thought we were under attack, and I ran up between the pilots. They sit up a little higher like that, you run up like that between them. And I'm looking up, and they tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Look down." I did. That's when I lost my enthusiasm right there, because there was 11 enemy ships coming right towards us.
Back on Midway, Commander Cyril Simard, Naval Air Station Commander, wanted more information before launching the Army Air Corps B-17s at his disposal against a sighting of a main body.
Then we got around behind them, and they kept us there for over 3 hours. Always amplify, all their things. They wanted more information about the ships and more of that. And we knew we were going to be dead in 5 minutes anyway, so we would try our best to get to the next group and go up and take a look and try to figure out what they were.
9 B-17s under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Walter Sweeney were launched from Midway on June 3rd. Just after 1640, they found their target. The Army Air Corps bombers dropped their bombs in 3 passes from high altitude, scattering the Japanese ships but achieving no hits. Back at Pearl Harbor, Admiral Nimitz responded to Ensign Reed's message of sighting the main body by sending a coded message to Admiral Fletcher. "This is not, repeat, not, the enemy striking force. Stop. This is the landing force. The striking force will hit from the northwest tomorrow.
Of course, that was a great feather in our cap. And Admiral Nimitz made the comment to Commander Layton at that time. He said, "You were 5 miles and 5 minutes off in your projection." But the orders to Admiral Fletcher and Admiral Halsey were not to launch any aircraft or any searches against the Japanese fleet or any attacks until we had had an attack on Midway.
In fact, our flight leader, Lieutenant Fieberling, had called us all together and said that the Navy knew that there was going to be a Japanese attack against Midway.
The Japanese launched their aircraft from the four carriers of Kido Butai, and at 04:45, 108 enemy aircraft formed up and headed southeast toward Midway at 125 knots. The Japanese also launched a reconnaissance of their own. 7 planes, Type 97 aircraft from Akagi and Kaga, and float planes from cruisers Tone, Shikuma, and Haruna. A haphazard and poorly executed fan-shaped aerial search that would have disastrous results for the Imperial Navy. At 05:45, Lieutenant J.G. William Chase, aboard PBY 3V-58, added in the clear with an uncoded message: "Many planes heading Midway, bearing 320 degrees, distance 150. This was to be followed at 05:52 by a second message from Chase: "2 carriers and main body ships, carriers in front, course 135, speed 35.
Well, we were quite excited about the opportunity to strike.
We'd barely joined up and we were in formation when my turret gunner called me and said he could see firing back from the island.
Midway defenders faced the Japanese attack with courage, but with antiquated planes. The old Brewster Buffaloes especially were no match for the Zero fighters. The Japanese had hoped to use the airfield on Eastern Island after their invasion and had not bombed the runways. But opposition from anti-aircraft and ground fire was fiercer than expected, prompting the Japanese flight leader to radio at 0700, "There is need for a second attack wave."
Had they have landed the way we expected them, we were sure prepared. Even if they'd have blown out a lot of the defenses, there'd have still been some guns there. There'd have been 50 calibers dug in those banks that survived. And maybe our old 3-inch might have, you don't know. We'd have had a lot of rifle power, and you read the history of Wake Island, you see what men can do, determined people. It'd have been a bloodbath.
Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die.